Okay, we're back. Welcome to my religious life video blog, and it's gonna be second Sunday of Pentecost, and I got, this is gonna be Lord of the Sabbath. It's not, anyone who's civilized about this one, already noticed about this one, can be civilized about this one. So guess what? Let's check this out. According to Mark chapter 2 verses 23 all the way up to chapter 3 verse 6, you know what I'm saying, because who knows, can be civilized. So here's more summary. One Sabbath he was going through the cornfields, and as they made their way, his disciples began to pluck heads of grain. The Pharisees said to him, "Look, why are they doing what is not lawful on the Sabbath?" And he said to them, "Have you never read what David did, and when he and his companions were hungry and in need of food, he entered the house of God when what's his face? Yes, Abiathar was a high priest, and he ate the bread of the presence, which is not lawful for any but the priest to eat, and gave some to his companions. Then he said to them, "The Sabbath was made for humankind, not humankind for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord, even of the Sabbath." So let's discuss this, shall we? We already noticed that in our discussion of Mark, chapters of Mark, that the Sabbath has been integrated into this weekly rhythms of Jesus, and it will clash just like this. That takes place about this one, Well, guess what? It takes place just between Jesus and the Pharisees, as far as we're concerned. And it's not over where to be absurd about the Sabbath, but over how to reserve this. Observe this. Take for instance, for the Pharisees, the Sabbath was primarily defined in negative terms of what they would ask if they has been prohibited by the commandment to do no work. Well, according to Exodus chapter 20 verses 8 through 11, and so is Deuteronomy chapter 5 verses 12 through 15, ask this simple question. To them, even the casual actions of these disciples are picking ears of grain, known as the cornfield, could be the constitutes of a kind of work, and thus ignores the prohibitions of this one. And it is very interesting that they describe this action as not lawful. And even though this such is a huge perspective of this specific application of the fourth commandment is lacking inside the Torah, which is found that out as well, because everything else can be civilized about the binding and do not considering this possibility they might be wrong. Even more objectionable for them is Jesus' act of healing, which I'll continue to read Mark chapter 3 verse 6 a little bit later, just a few moments. And it has something to do with the perspective of a key event leads to the Pharisees to plot against Jesus. Picture this. By contrast with the Pharisees and Jesus trying to regard this Sabbath positively, that the day of freedom from work is a gift from humanity's good, and the Sabbath are being made was made for, you guessed it, mankind, and not the mankind for the Sabbath. Well, moreover, the Sabbath affords opportunities to exercise this companionship. It could be exercising compassion and love, and such of a view of the Sabbath is a good prophetic and antecedent. Isaiah chapter 51 says links to the puzzles that we all did about the Sabbath with compassion and social justice in the service of God, and accumulating with the description of God's blessings on those who will call the Sabbath a delight. But the only thing that happens is compassion, justice, and Sabbath, suggesting that the Sabbath is more fully used as a day of worship by the demonstration of compassion and justice. Well, after all, guess what? In Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 15 says, after all, the Sabbath itself is remembrance of God's justice. And compassion is to delivering Israel free from slavery in Egypt. Now, believe it or not, if you know someone about this one, about the ears of you picking ears about the first account of the Sabbath, as I said to you on Mark chapter 2 verse 23, and it says that it could be Matthew, adds that the disciples are very hungry, and Luke describes their actions of rubbing the ears of grain, you guessed it, corn, and it between their hands before eating, such as you had to wash your hands, and your mom says, "Did you wash your hands?" Kid says, "Yes." Good. Sit down at the table and you eat your corn. As far as we're concerned. As far as we concerned. Now, Mark simply describes it as, picking the grain, known as the cornfields, which conveys the casual actions of the disciples. Disciples were probably absently picking the seeds and nibbing them. If you want to nibble a steak or nibble of watermelon or whatever it is. Yeah. But knowing this, the defense that Jesus offers when challenged by the Pharisees seemingly a little strange at first. You know why? Because the story about the temple, not the Sabbath. Sabbath. It happens all the time, as far as we're concerned, but the scholars are being divided, and whether the Jewish have a huge argument, and that's why the key to recognizing this holiness about this one, and Jesus' point is the holiness of the temple doesn't ridicule about this one, as far as we're concerned. Now, here's my observation for you. The man with the withered hand, and again, he entered the synagogue. This is from Mark chapter 3, and it says, oh boy, there was a man who was there who had a withered hand, because they watched him to see whether he would cure him on the Sabbath. So that they might accuse him. And he said to the man who had the withered hand, "Come forward. Come forward." Then he said to them, It is lawful to do good or to do harm on the Sabbath, to save a life or to kill." But they were silent. He looked around at them with anger, was grieving at their hardness of heart, and said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." He stretched it. And he stretched it out, and his hand was restored. The Pharisees went out and immediately conspired with the Herodian to destroy him.